What's going on, guys? I'm Sab and I'm back here to bring you another video today. In this video, we're going to be comparing Infinity Blade 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to be comparing these three games across four categories, and those are gameplay, story, size, and just other little tidbits about the game. So let's start off with gameplay. Now, the first game obviously had some very, very smooth gameplay, and although it did only have one weapon class, that weapon class was very good in that game, and it felt like it was a revolutionary game when it came out. It was one of the first iOS games to get touch controls right. Most other games had placed console controls on a touchscreen. It didn't work very well, and Infinity Blade was one of the first games to get those controls right on a complex game. Like other games like Angry Birds have great touch controls, but those are very simple games, and this is a more complex game, and it got the touch controls very, very, very well. And that made the gameplay very good. It was also the most difficult game of the series, I believe. It really challenged you, and I think that it was a very good game for gameplay if it didn't have as many different choices for the gameplay. It was a little more random in the attacks and stuff like that, but it did not offer as much choice as the other two games. Now, Infinity Blade 2, it stayed with the same basic gameplay, but added two new combat styles, Dual and Heavy. Now, Light was still in the game, although it suffered in Infinity Blade 2. It was nowhere near as good as it was in Infinity Blade 1. And Dual and Heavy were kind of being the two new ones, the ones that people hopped on at first. After a while, though, people realized that Dual was far and away the best weapon class. It did the most damage. You were free to allocate all your points to attack because you didn't need any for shield, because you were dodging and parrying everything. And it was just a superior weapon class in that game. Heavy was just a little too slow for most people, and a lot of people did like it, and people were able to use some gems to make it a lot better. But Dual was the most highly used and probably the best one in Infinity Blade 2. Now, it was easier than the first game. It had some gems, like the Periel gem made it a lot easier, and just overall it was an easier game. The stepbacks weren't as tough, enemies gave you longer attack windows, and just overall a little bit easier. But it was still a challenging game, and people did 5-to-1s to make it tougher. And it was a great advancement in the gameplay of the two games. Now, Infinity Blade 3 not only continued with those three weapon classes, it added not three entirely new ones, but three variations of those weapon classes available to be played with Issa. Issa was she's like the second playable character of Infinity Blade 3, and she has Cyrus's three weapon classes, although they're changed a little bit. Issa's duel is very, very similar to Cyrus's. There's almost zero difference, besides the way perfect parry breaks and supers behave, when those still do the same damage anyway. And Heavy was greatly improved in Infinity Blade 3. It's a lot more fun to use, and it's really Issa's Heavy and Cyrus's Heavy are both very, very fun to use. Cyrus's Heavy is much more fun to use than it was in Infinity Blade 2. Issa's Light and Cyrus's Light. Cyrus's Light is a lot better. It's almost if not as good as the Light in Infinity Blade 1. So I'd really, really like it. And I haven't tried Issa's Light too much, but it does seem very cool. It's very similar to Cyrus's Light, of course. You have a block button in the middle and two dodge buttons. Supers behave a little differently, but they're all very similar. They're just slight variations on the weapon class. And Infinity Blade 3, like I said, it improved the weapon classes. Dual was not improved in Infinity Blade 3. It's a little slower. Feels a little more clunky than it did in Infinity Blade 2, but it's still my favorite. I know that some people like Heavy more now, but it is my favorite still. Heavy still feels a little slower than Dual, and I just like holding two swords. But for the gameplay category, after talking about all three games, I'm going to have to give it to Infinity Blade 3. Just all the six weapon, or not six, but three in their variations of weapon classes that you can choose. The enemies have more step backs. Some of the enemies do juke moves. It's just overall a more varied game in terms of gameplay, and I really, really like how they did it with the gameplay. and just overall, I don't know, it just feels a lot more varied. Alright, so Infinity Blade 3 has won the gameplay category. Let's move on to story, and my winner for this might be a little bit controversial. I don't know, we'll have to see. Alright, so let's start with Infinity Blade 1. Infinity Blade 1 did not offer too much on the story. It was very mysterious. The God King's this all-powerful being that you have to go defeat, epic battle, sons avenging fathers and stuff like that. And eventually you do beat him, and you see a little globe, and you go down to the dungeons, and you open the 3 doors, beat the 3 bosses in there, which are all, 2 of them talk to you, one of them just smashes at you. Elysium offers a little bit, and later you find out that these are all deathless that you killed with the Infinity Blade. Even though the Infinity Blade was not fully charged, they were lesser deathless, so it was able to kill them. And then you open the main door, of course, and you find your ancestor, Arkarin, and formerly called Bill, and you find him in those dungeons, and it's just very, very, I don't know, it's very mysterious, and I liked that a lot, and I just liked the whole fantasy aspect. There wasn't too much technology. Technology is very cool, don't get me wrong. It was just very, I loved the fantasy, and finding your ancestor in the game was epic, and just sons of avenging fathers to go fight the God King is just a great story, I think. So let's move on to Infinity Blade 2. The fantasy world was opened up a little more, and you started figuring out what was going on. If I'm not going to be talking about the books in here because they're not really a part of this, but the books did help flesh out the story. But we're going to be focused on the games. In Infinity Blade 2, you start off in Sadie's Garden, go through there. God King's you eventually get to God King. He takes the Infinity Blade back. He's about to kill you with it. Issa shoots you in the head, and then you go to the Vault of Tears, which is Cyrus's former castle, or Alsar's former castle, and you start learning about his past as Alsar, whatever you want to call it, and you start learning about who he was, what he did. Was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? He's kind of not a very good guy. And you fight the 3 bosses, kind of figure out more about the Deathless, what's going on. I don't know what to say about the story, because it tried to make the story more complex, but I feel like when it tried to do that, it just made it simpler. And it's a good story, but I just feel like it was a little too simple, and it didn't really, I don't know. I was just kind of a little let down by the story. It was cool going to fight the God King again, and the cliffhanger ending was cool, but I just feel like the story is a little too simple for me. I don't know. Maybe you guys think differently. But anyway, let's move on to Infinity Blade 3. Cyrus is out of the vault. The God King goes to the Worker's Castle, fights him, gets defeated, sends Cyrus something that he needs to defeat the Worker, and the Worker stabs him with the Infinity Blade, and down goes Rajar. Rajar is dead forever, which was a very sad moment for this series, and it was just kind of sad to see that character die, because he'd been the antagonist of the game for a long time, and he was just killed off, and he was becoming a hero. It's kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of sad. It was very sad, actually. And then we move on. Cyrus goes through the journey, finds out about what the Worker's doing, eventually finds out the Worker was just doing all this to distract him, and then he goes to the Worker's castle, fights him. There's not that much story in between. Fights the Worker, and he ends up defeating him. The coolest thing about this story was, I think, what Cyrus did to the Worker when he says this is for redemption, and he stabs the Worker with the Infinity Blade, although it doesn't kill him. And what he does is he takes this little device that wipes the Worker's memory, just like the Worker did to Alsar back in the day, and turned him into Cyrus. So it's kind of a cool little revenge right there. I think that was the coolest part of the story for me. I don't know what it was for you guys. That was the coolest part of the story for me, and I really liked that. But otherwise, the story was kind of, I don't know. Redemption, the book was really good, but the game was just, I don't know. That was the coolest part, but the rest of the game was kind of, I don't know. It was a cool story because it continued the Infinity Blade story, but other than that, it wasn't that amazing. And then that little scene, Issa and Cyrus, that little campfire scene, that was kind of cheesy. But what was really cool after that was them seeing the baby, a Worker of Secrets, building a sandcastle on the shore, and he's building the sandcastle. There's a replica of the Worker's castle in the game, which is really cool. I thought that was a cool little scene. Maybe hinting at another game, I don't know. They did say this is the end of Cyrus's trilogy, but we'll just have to see. But yeah, so for story, I think that Infinity Blade 1 wins. You know, it doesn't offer up that much content, but it's just so mysterious and it feels really complex, and it's just an awesome story. Sons of Aging Fathers, you find your ancestor down there that joined the God King. Really, really awesome story. Infinity Blade 2 tried to continue that, but it was a little too simple. Infinity Blade 3 just didn't have that much content. It didn't really feel that mysterious either. So, I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, Infinity Blade 1 wins the story category. Infinity Blade 3 wins the gameplay category. So let's move on to size and stuff like that. So I think I don't even have to discuss which game's bigger. That's obviously Infinity Blade 3. It's got all the areas. Infinity Blade 2 does have a little more exploration. You can go around the castle and do whatever. But Infinity Blade 3 is definitely a bigger game if you're just talking overall app size and areas and stuff like that. It has 2 playable characters, weapon reforging, stuff like that, and just a bigger game. So Infinity Blade 3 is going to win the size category. And let's move on to others. Now this is an interesting one because I want to talk about a couple things. Infinity Blade 1 and 2 had New Game Plus, which was a game that allowed you to level up forever. Infinity Blade 3 does not have this, which is very disappointing to me. However, I did talk about this in another video. It may be coming back, but we're judging the game based on 1. Whatever update it's on right now. I think it's 1.0.2. I'm recording this on September 22nd, so that'll give you a frame of reference. And the worker, I don't know. I really wish it had New Game Plus, and it doesn't, which is kind of a bummer. But it does have weapon reforging, which is something that is very cool. It's kind of like New Game Plus. It allows you to remaster your weapons, which is what New Game Plus allowed you to do, but it's not infinite. It's only the level 10. And they did say they might raise that cap, but we are judging the game on 1.0, 1.9.2, whatever. So yeah, as of now, it does not have a limitless game mode like Infinity Blade 1 and 2 did, which is kind of a bummer. But it's whatever. It's still fun remastering weapons. And although it was more fun in Infinity Blade 1 and 2. And like I said in the previous category, Infinity Blade 2 has much more exploration. You can go wherever the castle you want. Infinity Blade 3 is very linear. You're going through castle after castle, and you have to go through in that order. You can't play whichever area you want after you beat the game. So Infinity Blade 2 definitely has the most exploration. Infinity Blade 1 had more exploration than Infinity Blade 3, but it also didn't have a very big area. So Infinity Blade 2 definitely wins in like just going around the castle and doing whatever. Another thing Infinity Blade 2 has the other two don't is just everybody can do their own thing. There's 3 open classes, so that opens up some stuff, and there you can go in old game forever, you can go in new game, level up your character. You can do that in Infinity Blade 1 as well, but Infinity Blade 2 is better at that because it had more weapon classes, more stuff to do. So Infinity Blade 2 is definitely a better game in terms of like exploration and like freedom, I think. Infinity Blade 3 doesn't have as much freedom as Infinity Blade 2 did. Infinity Blade 1 is kind of up in the air, but I think Infinity Blade 2 wins in exploration and freedom of choice. But yeah, so that's all I've got to say for now on Infinity Blade 1 versus Infinity Blade 2 versus Infinity Blade 3. If you've got some thoughts on it, or you completely disagree with me, or you hate me now because of what I said, please let me know in the comments, and I'll make sure to get back to you on that, unless you're just completely spewing whatever, I don't know. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, link in the description. Amio GameCenter name, it's in the description. I am Sab, and I'm saying goodbye. I'll see you guys later.